So we just finished talking about the wonderful properties of water. And remember, one of the first property we talked about was the fact that water is a solvent because it has polarity. So that means it dissolves quite a few things. And in our bodies, we have metabolic processes. Remember back to chapter 1. And these metabolic processes are important for our existence, and they are going to be known to produce hydrogen ions. If we're alive, we are making hydrogen ions from our metabolic processes. So we're interested in the concentration of hydrogen ions in the bodily fluids of the human. And a measure of the amount of hydrogen ions in the fluid is accomplished through the establishment of what's called the pH. So we're interested in the hydrogen ions, but we also have to look at the existence of hydroxide ions, because when we start thinking about pH and hydrogen ions, we start thinking about water. Water is H2O, right? Well, what works with a hydrogen ion to create water? Well, that would be a hydroxide ion, OH. So when we start looking at pH, we need to consider not only what hydrogen ion concentration is, but also hydroxide ion concentration is, because the combination of the two will give you water. So a peculiarity of this particular measure of pH is that it has an inverse logarithmic relationship. There's a lot of math behind this, but what it basically means is that as hydrogen ion concentration goes up, then you have a decrease in the amount of pH. And pH scale will run, at least as far as we're concerned, from 0 to 14. Now 0 to 14 is not the absolute limits of the pH scale. It can go higher and it can go less, but for our purposes, 0 to 14 is ideal. Okay, so again, the key here is as hydrogen ion concentration increases, pH decreases, and vice versa. Let's look at the scale and what defines the limits of the pH scale. And in this particular case, what defines the limit at 0 is the solution known as hydrochloric acid, HCl. When you have a 1 molar solution, and we just discussed that last video, go back and review it if you need to. 1 molar solution of hydrochloric acid, we are defining the 0 pH. For the 14 pH, we're looking at a concentration or a solution of sodium hydroxide, NaOH. Now, why are these the defining limits? Because when you put hydrochloric acid into water, it will immediately dissociate. The hydrogen ions will dissociate from the chloride ions, and you'll just basically be dumping pure hydrogen ions into water. On the other hand, in pH of 14, we have the sodium and the hydroxide solution. When we put that into water, the sodium immediately dissociates from the OH group, and we are basically dumping pure OH ions into that solution. So if there were any free hydrogen ions, they would associate with the hydroxide ions that have been freed, and you would get water formation. Hydrogen plus OH, or hydroxide, gives you water. Now, there are many other solutions listed here. Bleach, I've spilled a drop in that in my eye at one time. It's a story for later on. Ammonia oven cleaner, we don't use that a whole lot with the modern ovens and being self-cleaning and so forth, but nonetheless a very toxic substance. And what I want you to understand is that substances at this end of the scale, above a pH of 7, are still very dangerous, can be very dangerous for your overall health. We call these substances above from pH of 7 to a pH of 14, we term them as being alkaline or basic. Okay, that's again because they will donate hydroxide ions or they will accept hydrogen ions. These are known as bases. Below a pH of 7 to a pH of 0, these solutions are termed acids. And acids will donate hydrogen ions. That's their claim to fame. And we see many listed here. Wine, beer, certainly in the acidic range, as is Coca-Cola, other cola products like that. Lemon juice, of course, very toxic for your teeth, will degrade your enamel. So if you're one of those who likes to suck on lemons, you're doing yourself some harm there. Gastric juice in the stomach can range depending on when you've eaten, when you haven't eaten, and so that their pH is typically around 1.5 to 2. All right, so you can see these definitions on this slide. Very interesting material, and we've just defined acids and bases. There are other substances besides the ones you see listed in A, where you have the hydrochloric acid. There are other substances present besides acids and bases and that will dissolve in water readily and that don't donate hydrogen ions to a solution or hydroxide ions to a solution. And we call those salts. So let's go back to the pH scale here for a second. I wanted to address something again here. I wanted to talk about the pH of 7. pH of 7 is neutral. And ideally that would be absolutely pure water. But water is a great solvent, remember, so virtually there is nothing that we can say exists as absolute pure water because it dissolves everything. And also wanted to address what the normal pH is in our bodily fluids, in particular the blood. And our blood pH should be in the range of about 7.35 to 7.4, slightly alkaline or basic. And remember, though, that all of our metabolic processes are working to throw off hydrogen ions, which works to lower our pH. And if our pH of our blood got down to, say, even 7 at neutral, if it got down that low, really just a change of 0.35 to 0.4 in pH, you would be dead. And that's the incredible aspect of the human body. We produce substances called buffers that prevent this from occurring, and as long as you're in a fairly healthy state, you will produce these buffers in sufficient quantity to soak up or mop up or take care of these hydrogen ions that are constantly being produced just because you are metabolizing. Right? Now, the other way works the same as well, although perhaps not with quite as dire consequences. If your pH of your blood increased to say 7.8, 7.9, then yes, that's a dangerous aspect, but you will probably not die. You will go unconscious first. And so this general direction does not normally happen in any sense, shape, or form. Only during disease states will you encounter this type of pH change.